So this is, he who does not in this world help to turn the wheel, thus set in motion, is evil in his nature, sensual in his delight, and he, O Partha, Arjun, lives in vain. So if we look again at the wheel that Sri Krishna is talking about in this verse, it follows on that from sacrifice, there's rain, and then there's food and people. So it's the circle. So you imagine sacrifice, then rain, food and people. It's a circle and arrows going between the four. This wheel is actually taking place in the world. The world isn't chaos or random, and it doesn't just carry on working on by itself. The world is a perfect system, and everything within this world is actually interdependent. So everything is dependent one part on another. If one part is lost, then the whole machine is destroyed. You know, an example is when you have your car. It has so many parts. It's got small parts and large parts, and perhaps, you know, you might buy a small screw for 10 rupees, and that value might look like nothing. If it's damaged or destroyed, the whole system would be finished. So that 50,000 rupee car will stop working because of a 10 rupee screw that you're not able to find and that has gone missing. Therefore, in the wheel of this world that we just described, even if a small part goes missing, then the whole system is destroyed. So one who doesn't sort of understand this and doesn't align himself with the flow of this and with the flow of this system, such a person will create friction within himself. It's basically like driving the car without that essential 10 rupee part that you really need. It won't be smooth, the car will be damaged, and there'll be friction within the rest of the system. You know, it starts off with a really small thing, but ultimately the car will slowly deteriorate because it needs that small thing to continue working. Therefore, it's the duty of every person living in this world to make sure that the cycle will continue, and it will continue to move, and there's no friction within the system. And every person, each and every person, is a part of this wheel. So, you know, how can life be successful? We might ask ourselves this question, and you know, we sort of start to think of an example of a dance show. I'm sure people have seen dance shows. Everyone's interdependent, so you know, there's lots of different roles, and if one person suddenly just jumps on stage or is out of coordination with the others, the whole thing falls to pot. You know, you need every single person to be coordinated and planning and working together. You know, if you suddenly throw a person who doesn't know what they're doing onto the stage, it will just, you know, ruin the whole show. So, you know, it's really important that everything is working in this circle. And the problems that we have are sort of similar to this, because people are coming into this world and don't necessarily know what part they have to play in this dance show or in this show, in this world. And people don't necessarily know what to do, and they don't even sort of try to know the path that we have to play. And therefore, it's quite important to know what we should try to do in this world. And Drew often says that, you know, we'll see this further on as we go on, that we find what is right for us and find out what we should do in our lives. And life is an interdependent event. It's a combined thing. So everyone will have a particular part to offer and to contribute to our societies. So there's a story which Guruji has given us. And bear with me because it goes on for a bit, but the point is really important. Basically, Guruji was talking about a person that said, you know, when you wear a jabba or a shirt, you know, do we actually ever imagine how many people sweated and toiled to actually make it? There's such a big cycle behind when we wearing that particular shirt. Firstly, the seed for the cotton has to be sown, and that, you know, that's grown on the ground somewhere. The farmers worked for it for about 3 or 4 months. God has let forth rain to make the plant grow. The rain allows the plant to grow, then the cotton grows. That's just the beginning, and, you know, beginning stage. And then you can imagine what's needed to get from that part to part B. But, you know, if we just skip a step just to make it shorter, then we start from part B and we see, you know, the farmer's pulled out the cotton, he puts it into big bundles, then a labourer will carry those bundles away to a dock, then the bundles will go from a dock to a mill to then be separated, and then it's put into a machine. A person's working on the machine, and that whole work is a complete different thing. You know, you have to consider how many people did it even take to make that machine. You'd have to then take iron out of iron ore and purify it, but that's a whole different matter. So if we skip that bit, we then go back to the cotton being put into the machine by the worker. It's broken down, it's weaved, and a person would have to work really hard to then dye it, because the natural colour of cotton is not the colours that we wear. It's grey, and it would need to be turned white, say, for example, if the shirt's white. Then another person would then have to work hard to design it, then another person has to finish it, then it has to go to the wholesaler, then it has to go to the agent, then it has to go from the agent to the retailer, then the retailer will finally then place it into his shop. The tailor then, it doesn't stop there. The tailor then has to work really hard to make the amendments to it, to adjust it for the size of the customer. So all of this hard work just for one jabal, one shirt, and then, you know, we're wearing that on our bodies, but we haven't thought about all these different aspects and all the different hard work that goes into those shirts. You know, so many people have made an effort to contribute to this shirt that you're wearing. Therefore, you know, when you wear a shirt or when you wear a skirt or a jabot or anything, you should thank all of these people, because all of these people have sweated and toiled really hard to work for you to have that particular garment. And all you do is pay, say 40 rupees in India or £40 here, and, you know, you get a metre-long cloth and you're wearing it. But you're just giving that money. It's just, you know, 40 rupees or £40. But what about all those people's hard work? You know, if you took a pound or a rupee for every single person that contributed on that long line of events, it would be a lot more expensive than 40 rupees or £40. You know, they've done so much to contribute to it. So that's just one jabal, but that's just one thing. And if you could think about every other thing that you have, that we use throughout the day, you know, tables, chairs, everything, you know, we've got to think about all the different systems and everything that we're using, but often we're completely unaware of these things and we're quite ignorant of those things. You know, there's so many different wheels turning around. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been watching The Tube, but an example of that is how many different aspects of the tube that we don't even consider, we don't even think, you know, that happen underground. And when you suddenly stop to think about it, it stops you from criticising it. I mean, I've stopped criticising the tube now because I realise how much work goes into actually maintaining it. So if you think about this wheel, and you're not actually going to be able to criticise it in the same way that you're not able to criticise the food that's created for you. You know, when you sit down to eat chapati and dal, you suddenly realise how many people have sweated and toiled to make that. You know, you don't know those people, but you realise that a lot of people have contributed to your life. So everything and everyone is worthwhile. One who doesn't have the gratitude, you know, or even this attitude of gratitude and sacrifices, doesn't necessarily value this labour, and that person becomes sensual in his delight, as we see in the translation, becomes sensual in his delight, and he lives his life in vain, because he doesn't have any sense of gratitude or feelings towards the world. And he throws, you know, the 40 rupees or £40, and suddenly thinks he becomes the boss of that shirt or that shirt, you know, a jabot. And actually, no, we shouldn't have that. We should have the attitude of civility towards everyone that's around us. Again, on the tube, similar example, we should have the attitude of civility to everyone around us. You know, we're indebted to every person in the world, and Guruji's actually got an example of sitting on the train. You know, we don't necessarily know how certain people have contributed to our lives. We walk down to the end of the road and you pass so many people, but we don't consider, you know, was that somebody that perhaps was a builder who helped to build part of my house? Or when you sit down on the train, do you think, oh, that might have been the mother of the teacher who taught me? You know, there's so many different aspects, or somebody who even put together the clothing that you're wearing. That, you know, he might have been a labourer in the mill. So there's just so much that people might have contributed to your lives without you even realising it. And that's why we should see this beauty and respect this within every single person that we see. And again, it should make us think about this wheel that we're in. It might seem really complex and confusing at the beginning, but as you start to think about it, it all becomes clear, because after a person has helped, you know, when a person has helped a person that has helped you, he's basically indirectly contributing to your life. And that's another side to this circle. You know, an engineer might come and work in your house and you might be really grateful to him and you thank him, but have you thanked the people that have helped him to become an engineer? You know, his mother, his father, the people that have put him through school, you know, anyone who's contributed to him, his teachers, his lecturers. When someone falls ill and goes to get medicine from a doctor, then you're really grateful to that doctor, you know, for making you better, for healing you. But how many people sort of think, oh, thanks to his mother, thanks to his brother, his father, his predecessor, his professor, and everyone else. You know, there's countless people that contribute. So these are all just examples to show that we really should be grateful to everyone that is around us in society, and all those people who contribute to our lives. And because of that, you know, because of this particular doctor, for example, you're able to be healed. So if we start to think in this way, slowly, you start to see that you have a link with every single person in the world. You know, people say that people are only 6 ways removed from every single person. And you start to see how you can become grateful to everyone that's in the world. And as you start to understand this, you start to see God within every single person. You know, we might be told, oh, you should see God in everyone's eyes, but how to actually do that? You know, this is the way to do that, because you see the value in that person and the importance that person has in your own life. So there's a sentence, it says, Siya Ram Maya Sabha Jaga Jani Karo Pranam Jori Juga Pani. And that actually, you know, shows that the same sentence, it shows that we should see God in every person in this world, and we should think from this perspective. We should have feelings and have faith. We have sort of Sita and Ram, and we think of Sita and Ram. And if you think of Sita and Ram in every single person in the world, then we'll see how that person has contributed towards you. And that person, you should have conviction in your thought for that. It's not just okay to think of it, but you should really believe it too. Not having that particular attitude is a sin, because everyone has done something good for us, and not having to thank them shows that we're not grateful. So it's really difficult to repay the sin of ingratitude. And I'm just going to go on now to draw comparisons between two types of people. You have the word agayu and punyayu in the verse. So this, Sri Krishna's used that word, those two words here. And they're quite important because they mean totally contrasting things. We must understand the difference between these two words so that you understand what is in the bracket of sin and what's in the bracket of punya. So, you know, when we look at the difference, the first difference of agayu is that someone who lives a sinful life. And then you have someone who's a punyayu, who lives a rich life. And then you have an agayu who sort of lives his life by senses and appealing to his senses, trying to do things that make his senses happy, whereas the punyayu person is in control of his senses. There's a big difference. The third difference is that an agayu doesn't help to keep the wheel of sacrifice in this world in motion, and therefore he is not a nice person, whereas the punyayu helps to keep this world of sacrifice in motion. And the fourth, an agayu lives in vain, whereas the punyayu lives successfully. The latter has always been successful in life. The fifth difference is an agayu because he buys other people's things to make himself happy, and the punyayu, on the other hand, gives his own things to other people, and he makes other people happy through this gesture. The sixth difference is the attitude of selfishness that the agayu has, and the punyayu has the attitude of sacrifice. Thus, there are many differences between the two, so I'll just run through those again, because I'm speaking quite fast. Agayu is one who lives a sinful life, whereas a punyayu is someone who lives a rich life. An agayu is someone who does what his senses like, whereas a punyayu has control of his senses. An agayu does not help to keep the wheel of sacrifice in motion, whereas the punyayu does. An agayu lives in vain, whereas a punyayu lives successfully. The first one buys things to make himself happy. The second gives things to make others happy. And the agayu has a selfish attitude, whereas the punyayu has the attitude of sacrifice. Now, the agayu will basically lead to catastrophe, whereas the punyayu will lead to salvation. So these attitudes, in terms of their consequences, are completely different. One is, you know, catastrophe, and one is salvation. So it's obvious which one we should aspire to go to. Now, we may wonder, why does an agayu actually live in vain, and why are we using those words? And it's basically because if a person is trying to work against the natural system that God has put in place, then how can that person actually win? You know, his victory will be impossible. So an example is of a river. You know, a river is flowing really fast, and if someone tries to work against the river and go against the system, he's not going to succeed. He's going to be swept away and pushed down along with the energies of the river. You know, a successful person, on the other hand, will observe where the river is going, and if he wants to be successful, he understands that in order to be successful, he'll have to go with the natural flow of the river. Such a person will then go where the river will take him. Only a person who accepts life without complaint can be happy in this world. And effort is the most important thing here, because a helpless acceptance will not work. The acceptance must happen after you're convinced, and it must be a healthy acceptance, and you should never be helpless. A person sort of who accepts this natural flow of energy and accepts God's creations will understand and accept that God has put this into place, and he will understand that it's a lovely system, and he will live in harmony with it. A person that continues to complain about it will never be successful, and that's why it says in this verse that such a person will live in vain. In the 17th and 18th and 19th verses, Sri Krishna will go on to talk about a very important side to Karma Yoga, and this will show how one should perform such actions. We'll move on to verse 17.